The medieval period is one of the most misunderstood and degraded periods of history. From 500 to 1500, the world was drastically shaped by medieval ingenuity in the face of hardship. However, this history is often looked over for reasons I'll discuss later. To understand why our modern perceptions of the Middle Ages are false, we must first define what the Middle Ages were. The medieval period lasted from the fall of the Western Roman Empire to the Italian Renaissance. While the exact end of the Middle Ages was not a single event, most historians cite the year 1500 as an end to the period. The Middle Ages are separated into three parts: the Early Middle Ages, the High Middle Ages, and the Late Middle Ages. The Early Middle Ages lasted from 500 to 1000 CE. This age is frequently referred to as the Dark Ages. This term originally referred to the lack of documentary evidence for the period. It later gained the connotation that the entire medieval period was insignificant and lacked progress. This ended with the beginning of the medieval warm period, or the High Middle Ages. This is marked by a growth in population due to a global rise in temperature, allowing for a longer growing season. The Little Ice Age, or the Late Middle Ages, was marked by a drop in temperature, causing famine. The Middle Ages are often neglected by people who believed they were insignificant and inconsequential on the scale of world history. This is false. The Middle Ages saw the creation of the university system, early forms of the modern judiciary, the richest man recorded to have ever lived, and the beginning of the world's second largest religion. These are hardly inconsequential additions to history. In a similar manner, many people believed that medieval people were stupid and superstitious. While medieval people didn't understand concepts like germ theory, they contributed to global learning that modern people benefit from. Great scholars like Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi advanced the understanding of algebra. Geoffrey Chaucer wrote the famous Canterbury Tales. Polyphonic music came about during the 9th and the 10th century. The mechanical clock was invented during the Tang Dynasty circa 725 CE, and crop rotation and the three-field system revolutionized agriculture. This demonstrates the importance of the Middle Ages and their impact on world history. Furthermore, witch panics did not happen in the Middle Ages. Hysteria around witches began in the early modern period. In medieval penitentials, books instructing priests on how to live their lives, witches did not exist, and only God had the authority to reorder the universe. If a person believed they were a witch, the priest was instructed to dispel the idea and admonish them for thinking they had magical powers. Modern people made this myth up to separate themselves from such nonsensical abuses of power. Additionally, medieval people did not believe the world was flat. Scholars knew the world was round and depicted it as such. One of the most popular books in Europe at the time was literally called On the Sphere of the World. Illiterate people during the period likely didn't care what the shape of the earth was. The topic was not widely debated like it is today. In fact, Pythagoras, the mathematician, is credited with being the first person to suggest the world was round in 500 BCE. Aristotle proved the earth was round in 400 BCE, and Eratosthenes calculated the earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy in 240 BCE. Modern flat earthism was invented in the 19th century. The myth that medieval people believed this was created to highlight the separation of religion and science during the Enlightenment. On the other hand, Christopher Columbus was an imbecile. He conjectured that the actual circumference of the earth was much shorter than Eratosthenes had calculated. He believed that because of this, he could easily sail to Asia the opposite way. Imagine trying to sail the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans plus the space where the Americas are in 1492. Had the Americas not have been there, he and his crew likely would have died. The reason why people hadn't tried this before is because they, to the best of their knowledge, assumed that there was a massive ocean there. Columbus died believing that he was correct and he had found a new route to Asia. Moreover, medieval people didn't purposefully avoid bathing. Medieval people wanted to be clean. and associated filth and foul smells with disease and death. Although most people didn't take baths daily, most people washed themselves with a basin multiple times a day. Full immersion baths were less frequent but did happen. Part of the reason why women in the Middle Ages wore a head covering is because it kept their hair cleaner for longer. Public baths were commonplace in cities, and many people bathed in rivers when the weather was warm. This idea is one of the many myths created to make modern people feel more civilized. Some historians have nationalized the Middle Ages, making up a backstory to a nation to justify its superiority over others. In actuality, the idea of a country was invented after the Middle Ages, and political boundaries during the period were constantly changing. A few historians have romanticized the Middle Ages, telling fables of isolated white Christian societies where a chivalrous knight saves a damsel in distress. The truth is that trade networks like the Silk Road brought goods, ideas, and people throughout Afro-Eurasia. The Americas experienced growth with the Maya, Inca, and Aztecs rising to primacy during their medieval period. People justify colonization with these false myths by keeping up the narrative that before the Age of Discovery, everywhere but Europe was dormant and uncivilized. That is why it is important to separate fact from fiction when it comes to the medieval period. Thank you for watching.